Alright, what we have here is the graveyard setting. One of the most fun settings that we have. It's a lot of fun to put together, and I had tons of fun drawing this. So, let's get started. First off, we follow the instructions and see what they say. So, step 1. Glue the part labeled GY1 to the space on the ground labeled GY1. Okay? Now what does that mean? It means this part right here is going to be bent to make a sort of half I-beam. That's what I think of it as. It's going to provide the support for the piece that pulls all the graves up. It makes it possible to have all these individual graves that are pulled up by this piece. So it's a very important piece, and should match the ground texture, although a lot of these won't. On this one, the ground texture will be hidden underneath here, most of it, so it will never ever be seen. Why did I spend 2 days drawing it? I guess I'm crazy. Okay, so next part, we've glued that in place. Now we glue parts, so GY2 and GY3, okay? Now those pieces should look pretty nondescript. They look like this, okay? And this. Now I dropped all of these pieces on the floor earlier in my basement, so I'm not entirely sure that we will have them all, but we'll find out. So GY2 and 3, unlike GY1, don't match up with the ground texture. So match up the arrows, match up the numbers. The ground texture will not match up on these, or on any of the ones you're about to do, which is all of these ones that say GY1/2, GY1/3. Those all mean that's the number of the size of an inch that the slot they'll have to go through on the top. So basically, any GY1/2 can be glued down. Any one GY1/2, you'll see a slightly lighter brown section there, and that's what you want to line the back up to. And then you're going to want to glue all of these graveyards down like that. The ground texture won't match up. They don't need to go in any particular order. Just match them up with the right number, the right size. Match up the 1/2s with the 1/2s, and I think there's one extra gravestone that you don't use. You can use it for something else, I guess, if you want. But you don't need to use it to fill up all the slots. So you have a GY1/2, match it up with the GY1/2, and glue it down good. And you should have enough gravestones. If you haven't dropped them all into the corner of your basement out of sheer stupidity, like I did earlier, you should be able to find a gravestone to go in each spot. And if I don't, then I'm going to be doing some more cutting and or searching down the crevices of the concrete basement flooring behind the shelves where I put these so wisely so that they would not get moved, and then I totally moved them and they all fell back behind there in the spider webs. It was really creepy getting it out, but I figured that was probably what I wanted out of a graveyard type of thing, you know, like I wanted a creepy experience, and I got one. So lucky me. Now if you really wanted a particular graveyard in a particular spot, you could put a smaller piece into a larger gravestone, or you could make the effort to cut out that gravestone slot up above so that it was wide enough to fit the gravestone that you wanted there. I'm trying to think of a reason why you would need to do that. You could always make your own gravestones too. I mean, these are fairly generic looking gravestones. Pretty much anything you come up with will probably fit. So if you wanted to make some gravestones that had like your pal's name on them or something, your pet dog's name from when you were a kid, make it a pet cemetery. Again, it's very important you match up the arrows on these, make sure they're pointing in the same direction. They don't have to be in the same spot on the tab, but they do need to be pointing in the right direction, or else you are going to be running into some issues. Alright, I need to find 2 more gravestones. 1. It's 3/8 inch one. Okay. Two. Got a 1/2 inch one. Just need 1 5/8 inch one. There it is. Aha! Take that. Spiders under the shelves. I have braved your cobwebs and emerge victorious. Okay. So, now that we've got all the graves glued down, we're going to give that a few seconds to dry while we look at the instructions to see what comes next. Carefully slot the gravestones into the GY upper platform as you glue GY 14 and 15. So we actually, looks like we skipped the step where we glue GY 13 down. That now we glue GY13, and what that is, it's this big spot right here. And so we're going to bend this piece in half. We're going to glue GY13 right on down. And will it match up with the texture? No. Because no one will ever see this after you've glued it together. What you want to do is glue it so that that bend, so that this bend here along this edge lines up with this bend along this edge. Pretty simple concept. You know, make sure it's centered approximately, and you can lay it down. I'll give you a chance to push all these down a little bit. Lay it down and make sure your corners, you know, make sure that it's, not only is it lined up here, but that it looks like it's centered on the page, okay? See this space here and this space here should be the same distance. If this is centered on the page, that will make your life a lot easier. Tried it both ways, sadly. Alright, so with this in place, you can now glue down GY14. What I like to do is glue GY14 down. You know what, with the whole thing flat. The whole thing will lay flat there. Give it a couple of seconds to dry. Pull it up. Glue it down a second time if need be. Should be able to fold it flat like that. Fold it either way. Good bend. Okay. Let that dry while we glue down GY15. Let's make sure all of these suckers are, all these little gravestones are laying bent, going the right way. Now, these pieces under here may seem trivial, but they really provide a lot of the support for the whole thing in the end. And you want to make sure they're glued down good and they're glued down tight. So give them a couple of seconds, give them some time. It's important. Alright, so now you're ready to start slotting your little gravestones into their homes. Start with the ones in the back. Move towards the front. Standard gravestone popping procedure. They should each have a little slot lined up for them. And if you cut out the white space on those slots, it should work perfectly. If you didn't, now's a good time to take apart the whole thing. Cut out those slots. Slots are an important part of pop-up creation. So if you're not cutting out the slots, you're going to have some real, very real issues in terms of trying to get the gravestones to work. They won't work. You need to cut out the slots. And I don't actually know if pop-up has a terminology for this type of technique for pulling stuff up. I've always called it the flower patch technique in my head. Because, I mean, you could use it as well as pulling up gravestones. You could pull up a nice little field of flowers. And that's actually the first place I encountered this in a pop-up book. Was it? This technique was being used to pull up a field of flowers. Alright, so those are in. They're in place. It's exciting. It looks like a graveyard, so it's always good when what you're trying to make looks like what you're trying to make. So now you need to glue down these edges, kind of put the nail in the coffin, so to speak. And you may have to go back through, and especially with some of the shorter tombstones, you might have to go back through and pop those back up. So glue one side first. GY4 in this case for me is the side that looks like it's going to be the easiest, so I'm going to glue that first. I'm going to line it up with the ground textures best I can. Make sure all my gravestones are in. And really at this point, making sure that the surface lies flat is more important than making sure the ground texture lines up. So the slightest tweak in that angle can make it so that the surface doesn't lie flat. And I'll show you some ways to deal with that in a second. But for now, the ground texture lining up. I mean, it's nice, but the highest priority is making sure that the pop-up works. So if you can see that by lining up the ground texture, you're going to make it so the pop-up doesn't work, then go ahead and make a judgment call at that point and say, well, let's make sure the pop-up works. So we've done that, and we've got a couple of places where the ground comes up a little higher than in other places. Okay? That is why these spacer pieces have been provided. They're 3 spacer pieces provided just for that, so that you can take them kind of in this little C shape here, and if there's a spot where you think, well, it might be better if this ground is held down a little bit more, you can pop your spacer piece in there and make it so that you are doing good. So you want to make sure that those spacer pieces are put in so that they're running parallel to the gravestones, running parallel to everything else you've glued on the ground so far, so that they pop up and down. And at this point, you can go ahead and try giving your thing a fold. Make sure your gravestones aren't encountering too much difficulty. Fold it flat, pop it back up, and see where things are at. This is a fairly advanced setting, so it's going to require a little more tweaking than some of the lower ones. And now is also a good time to use your spacers to keep the ground flat. That's one of your tools, okay? But it's not your only tool, okay? So I've got a spacer in here whose job it is to pull the ground flat. But I've also got this bush segment Just a little piece of foliage that I'm going to stick on this grave here to pull the ground down a little more when it pops up. Okay? For some reason, I'm having trouble gluing the right spots on these. Alright. So, it acts, acts as sort of a upper limit for how high the ground can go in that spot, because it's there. And I'm going to go ahead and add another spacer on this side. I like to have the ground on the graveyard feel pretty flat. Makes things work a little more easily. It's nice to give them a little more support. You want to make sure those spacers are not coming out to the side though, because you're going to be putting other pieces in that is important, are able to come in and hug the side as closely as possible. Right. Next, we are doing G8 through G11. That's going to be these outer walls. So, they're nice long sections. Fold them in half, fold out the bottom tabs, and you glue them down. Again, take a look at where you're gluing. Ground texture, it'd be nice if it lines up, if you've done everything right in the middle, but if you haven't done everything right in the middle, maybe you got things a little bit off, maybe they're not quite centered, it's more important to put things where they will work than where the ground texture lines up. Okay? If they don't work, it doesn't do you any good to have the ground texture line up perfectly. So make sure they're on there. Make sure they come pretty close to hitting that wall, so there's not a ton of gap in between that space. Because I just think it looks better. Things line up a little more closely. And we're still not folding it flat. We want to make sure that we're giving our stuff some time to dry. And same thing with the other side. Make sure that they look like they're going to work. Doesn't do you any good to have it in the perfect spot if it's not going to work. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. We want to make sure that these edges don't extend too far past these edges. If they do, it's okay to go in there with some scissors or X-Acto knife and clip off a little bit so they don't extend too far past, because if they're extending too far past, we're going to run into problems. So, if it extends past that, just clip off that space. You could leave it there if you want to invite trouble down on your own head. But it's going to be easier just to clip it off and give yourself a little extra space there. Make sure everything's going to work later on. So, and that's what we're about to do. We're about to glue on these step pieces, I think. I might as well take a look and see what we're supposed to do. Yep, 6, 7, 16, and 17. So, And again, put it where it works, rather than putting it in a place where you think it's where it lines up, but it's not going to work. Don't do that. If it's not going to work, put it where it works. Okay? And it's important that you put these pieces on before you put the little side pieces on that kind of form the wings on these, because if you put those pieces on first, these pieces, they'll still work, but it's harder to get them to the glue doesn't dry as well. So, the glue doesn't dry quite as well. Better to do it this way. Okay. And then we're going to do GY 21, 22, 18, 19, 20, 21. 18, 19, 20, and 21. Alright. Already got 20 and 21 here. Might as well glue them on, and they're just going right on there. If you've done the other parts right, they should just stick right on. Shouldn't be anything to push them off because you trimmed off that extra spots, the extra space on your side pieces. And if you didn't, it's not too late. Any extra material there is just going to cause a little extra tension. So this is just a way to make sure that it works. That it works right, and that it works right every time. Pop-up tends to be all about creating or reducing the tension that is created by what you're doing. Much like a marriage. Alright, let's do this central gazebo piece. This is kind of a tricky one. So, GY23 to make the basic crypt structure. What we want is for the inside of the crypt to be the emptier side, okay? There are less glue points on the inside of the crypt. So that becomes the inside of this hexagon-shaped crypt you're about to make. And it leaves all these wonderful glue points on the outside where they will be accessible, ready to be glued, ready to have stuff glued to them. So there we go. Glue the roof on with GY 30 and 31. And honestly, it goes better if you flex these joints first before you glue anything on. 30 and 31. Glue on here. And what you want to do is have these glued on so that this line at the edge comes down to the top of that glue spot. So center it and then glue it onto there so that so that this line comes to the top of that glue spot. That way when it pops up, it'll pop up, make a nice shape. What you want to have is so that this line comes right to that line that's drawn at the edge of the roof. It's the roof underhang part there. This comes right to that, not quite down to the glue spot. That'll give it enough space to pop up to become the hexagon shape that it needs to be. If you glue a little lower down, that's fine. It just won't be quite as hexagonal when it's done. Slot the angel's pillar through the crypt roof slot and glue GY22 to the ground. Ground texture will not match here either, because again, this is a place where no one will ever see it. So so I didn't feel it was totally important to have it match. So this piece gets slotted through the slot on the top of the roof. Hopefully you cut that out, so that the angel, when it pops up, will be able to come out of the roof. And then we'll glue down GY22 to the ground. Hold that there probably for a good 20 seconds, because that's going to be a piece that if it comes up will be a massive pain to fix. In the meantime, we'll gather the other pieces that we need. Then 24 and 25, so those will be the edge pieces. We're not gluing those quite yet, but we're holding this in place. We're going to need these pieces. We're going to need these two pieces. We're going to need these two pieces. They're all parts of the gazebo. We should have 2 extra gravestones that we can use to spice things up. Maybe we'll stick those somewhere cool. And we've got these bushes that are going to be really cool to put in different places. So we are got all our pieces laid out here, and this has been about long enough. So we're going to glue down GY24 and GY25. We should be able to apply a little bit of pressure to those to glue them down, because of GY3 and 4 that we glued down earlier. Alright, so we're going to get those about in the right place, and then we're going to fold everything up while holding them in about the right place, because that's really going to be the only way we can apply any pressure at all to this thing. And it could be that when we open this up, they're not going to be in the right place. Looks like that piece could have been glued on a little better. Impossible to say. And it looks like 24 and 25 were not in the right place, so they slipped out of place. We want to glue them down again, this time making sure that they're far enough out. In fact, it might be easier to glue them down one at a time, or at least glue one side down, lay it down, and then glue down the other side. And there's a couple of tricks that you'll develop as you put these together, beyond what I can currently teach you, to get things to stick in the right place and stay there. How's that looking? Looking like it needs to be moved. Alright. So again, this is a part that, you might have to pull them up. You might have to readjust a couple of times just to make sure that they are, in fact, in the right place. I mean, you can look on the ground, you can see where the stones are laid out for them to be. But really, it's just going to take some time and some patience, a little bit of fiddling to get them in exactly the right spot, so that when it pops up, the whole thing pulls into a nice hexagonal shape. Could be pretty tough, I don't know. Could be pretty tough. And sometimes what I like to do is make sure it's in the right space. Then I let it sit like that, kind of half open. Let it dry for a little while. In the meantime, let's take a look at these, okay? These are designed so that they look like this. Okay, there's a lot of glue points here. They'll be folded down, left, down, right. Okay? Both sides will be folded like that. Down, left, down, right. To make a little, got a period down here, I guess it would be like a question mark, you know. Upside down. Question mark. Spanish start of sentence question mark. Again, I don't speak Spanish, so take that with a grain of salt. Alright, so that's looking like a nice little gazebo there. Sepulcher, graveside thing. We're going to glue GY26 and GY29. 29 you just kind of tuck up under the eaves there. 26 you just tuck into the bottom. And these pieces, while they do go into place pretty easily, you do want to give them a little time to dry before you start messing around with them. Maybe even go into your X-Acto knife and press them down. And then we've got 33. And 32, and those are just little roof pieces, that tile roof spots to make it look good. And then 34 and 35, these cool pieces that go on the top. Just kind of line those up with the spot where they fit into that shape. And you can see where the shape fits together there, so that's where they go. And then you can glue on these bushes, and really you could glue them anywhere you wanted, but I like to glue this one here in the middle row of the side with the bushes on it. And I like to glue this one in front of it here. Right there. And then this piece I glue over here because there's a couple of bushes over here. And I use it to pull those downward a little bit so that this lines up with the exit area there a little bit better. Then we glue GY12 and GY 22 and 30, which attaches this piece to the back of this, and to there. And that's it, really. At this point, I'm going to let it dry a little bit while I cut out some of these cool gravestones that I have that are extra and decide what I'm going to do with them. So, Alright, what I've decided I'm going to do is that because of the way this bush works, I think it'd be cool if there was a gravestone leaning against it. So I can put that right there. And what'll happen is that when the bush pops up, this gravestone should pop up too. Put that right up there. Alright, it's ready to be folded up and tested, and we're going to want to watch the walls in here, these sections, to make sure that everything does what they're supposed to be doing on the gazebo. Well, it's not a gazebo, it's a crypt, but I tend to think of a lot of structures as gazebos, whether or not they are. Give special attention when popping back up to make sure that everything's lining up right, tensions are good. And it looks like I didn't trim this enough. So, again, these will be a major source of tension on the sides if you don't trim them a little bit, you know, just to make sure things aren't lining up, you give them a trim. Because of what I just did, and now I'm able to use some of my gravestone here to have a little extra gravestone laying around. It's nice to have extra pieces because you can use them to cover up mistakes. Alright, so let's do the pop-up again. This is one of my favorite parts. It's where the angel kind of emerges from the crypt as you pop it up. I love that. Alright, and because of our extra area we've given on the base, we can give that a little bit of flex. Not a ton of flex, you don't want to flex too much. But just give it a little flex, a little bit past alignment, and that allows it to stretch when you're popping it up so that it lays flat instantly. If you wanted to just set it out and have it sit there for an hour to lay flat, you could, but giving it this extra space, flexing it upon opening it, really makes the difference in terms of it laying flat, and that laying flat creates more friction with the table, so it's less likely to get knocked around the table. So there you go, the pop-up graveyard. Enjoy.